Hello, and thank you for joining me today. Welcome to video number 2. I'm Jen Allen, a mental health practice owner, grief advocate, and the heart behind the ashes we keep. If you're grieving or walking alongside someone who is, you have probably heard about the 5 stages of grief. But here's the thing that usually gets skipped when a lot of folks talk about these 5 stages. Grief does not follow rules, and it does not move in a straight line. And honestly, these stages almost never happen for any of us in any certain order, and they're usually recurring. So today, I want to walk you through the original 5 states of grief, and then introduce you to a lesser known but very powerful 6th state. That's the one that helped me the most in my own grief journey. You'll notice that I did say state instead of stage, and that's because I feel like when we say stages, it insinuates that there's a specific order that these are supposed to happen in, and that there's an endpoint to them. But that's not how grief works. These states were originally introduced to us by psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in 1969. She originally meant to use these to describe how people cope after they've been diagnosed with a terminal illness, but over time, they've been applied to all kinds of loss. So let's go through them. Number 1 is denial. This is your mind's way of protecting you from the full impact of what has just happened. One common thing that people say is this can't be real or this could not have happened. Denial is a cushion. It's a pause button or a shock absorber. And it's totally normal to go through this. I like to call denial the friend who helped me stand, breathe, and talk to people, especially in the first 6 months after Daniel left us. Number 2 is anger. Anger can show up loud and obvious, or it might simmer quietly under the surface. You could be angry at a person, a situation, yourself, or even the person that you lost. And you know what? That's totally okay. Anger is not bad. It's often pain looking for a way out. I like to call anger the friend who validates the fact that this shit is not fair. And sometimes life hands you a giant sack full of crap. Number 3 is bargaining. This is the what if stage. People say things like, if only I had done this, or what if I had gotten there sooner? The list goes on and on. This is our brain's way of trying to undo the loss, to make sense of what feels senseless. This is how we try to take back our control. I like to call this my friend that allows me to live in a place of fantasy where I can trick or bargain my son back into existence. Number 4, depression. This doesn't mean necessarily clinical depression, but we're talking about a deep, natural, overwhelming sadness. Some people feel numb, people feel exhausted or disconnected, and some people describe feeling like they're underwater. This is where the reality of the loss really begins to sink in. I like to call this my friend. She understands the depth and magnitude of my loss. Number 5 is acceptance. This does not mean that you are okay with what happened. A lot of people run from this state for that reason. It just means that you have stopped resisting reality. An example is maybe you are starting to say to yourself that grief is part of my life now. For many of us, though, especially those of us carrying a deep personal loss, there's the feeling that something will always be missing. Acceptance is my friend that doesn't push me to move on, and she makes space in my life for peace and joy. She makes space for meaning. That's the perfect segue to introduce you to the sixth state, making meaning. This state was introduced by grief expert David Kessler. He worked with Kubler-Ross and later experienced the loss of his own child. It's important to note that meaning making is not about moving on. We do not simply move on and leave our grief behind. This is more about moving forward while carrying your grief with you. It's about finding a purpose, creating connection, or honoring your loved one in a way that's meaningful to you. That can look like sharing your story, starting a project or writing a blog, creating art, or planting a tree. It can also be simply living your life in a way that reflects their legacy. I always say that Daniel's legacy will be my joy and success in life and not my destruction. For me, the ashes we keep is a part of that meaning. It doesn't even come close to erasing the pain, but it gives my grief a place to go. This is the friend that helps me put Daniel's legacy into action. This is where I find my joy. So whether you're stuck in anger, numb in depression, or wondering if you're doing this grief thing right, let me tell you this as clearly as possible. There's no wrong way to grieve. The states aren't a checklist. They're just a framework for understanding the emotional chaos that comes with the loss. You may go back and forth. You may skip one. You may repeat them over and over again, and that's totally okay. I like to think of it as a giant ball of yarn instead of a list or some kind of linear path that I'm supposed to take. What matters most is this: you are not broken. You are grieving, and you are not alone. If this spoke to you, I'd love for you to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who you think might need it. Let's keep these conversations honest and keep rising through the ashes together. Thanks.